Welcome to this video. In this video, we are going to look at the essential concepts in Python. So before we begin, I want to talk about this particular environment that I am using for creating the code. So I'm using idle, which is an IDE that comes with Python. When you install the current version of Python, it comes with idle. So you will not need to install an extra platform. So idle has this is the place where your code is executed, and then if you want to write the code separately from this console, you can have create a file, go to file, and then create new, and then you can write your code here, and then you can run. So that's another option. Or if you just want to see what's happening to your code and you want to execute it immediately, for example, if I have something like this, and then you want to execute this, you can just type it in this console window and then it will come out. So one of the basic concepts in Python is called variables, which are the basic building blocks for Python. So variables are basically things that store our data so that we can manipulate them later. So we can create a variable by giving it a name. So in Python, you do not have to specify the data type that that variable will store. So you don't have to specify that before you assign a value. So when you assign a value to a variable in Python, that's when the data type is assigned. So whatever value you give to that variable, then that will become the data type for that particular variable. So when you're creating your variable, you need to grant them a name, and this name case sensitive. So for example, name is not the same as a names with a capital letter. So if I try to access names like this or name like this, then I will get an error if I try to run that saying that this is not defined, because this is different from this other name, because Python variables are case sensitive. And then another thing that you need to know is that you need to give your variable meaningful name. So for example, if I wanted to store data that contains people's name, if I just say x is equals to, for example, Alice as the name, someone who's reading my code might not really understand what this x stand for. So it is very important that when you're creating your variables, you give them meaningful names. So to create a variable in Python is very simple. You give it a name and then you assign a value. So to assign a value to your variable, you actually use the equal sign to assign a value to the variable. So for example, I said number is equals to 10. So what this does is takes the number 10 and stores it in my variable called number. So when I want to access this value number later, I will just type the name number, so I will be able to see what is to the number, and these are the results of number. So that is how you create a variable, and that's how you will store a value to a variable. So you can assign a string value to a variable. So to assign a string, you use quotation marks. So you can say, for example, we can say names is equals to Angela, and then you put this into quotation mark. So this will say, this will tell Python that this particular value is a string when you put quotation marks in them. You can use single string, double strings, all of them are allowed in Python. So if I say names is equals to, and then I say Karen or David with single quotes, it will still be okay. So as I said, Python variables are case sensitive, so these two are different names, are actually two different variables. So I can access the first one by just typing names, and then it gives me Angela. If I write names with the small letters, it gives me David. So this is how you assign a string variable. The other data type that you can store is a float. So when I create, for example, weight, I can say my weight is equals to 40.78. So that gives the value of a floating point. So this variable now stores a floating point. When we mean a floating point is basically numbers that have decimal places. So you can say if I want to see the value of weight, I can just type weight and get the value. So the other thing I want to show is that you can get these values of the variables from the keyboard, that the user can actually type the values from the keyboard to so that they get stored in the variable. So for example, if I wanted to create have the user enter their age, I will say age is equals to, using the input function. So the input function stores the value, asks the user to input the value. So the input function, which is basically an inbuilt function in Python. So if I want to store an integer, I will put int in front of the input function so that the value captured will be an integer. And then I will put the instructions to the user here, and I will say enter your age. So when I run this thing, it gives me a prompt that tells me to enter my age, and if I say 30, then that runs. So if I want to access that value and see what the user had entered, I'll just type age and then I'll get 30. So the other way to be able to see your output is using the print function. So you can say print age, my variable age here, and it will show you. So the print function is used to display something on the screen. So you can use print age and you will get a 30. So both print and input and the int function are already predefined functions in Python. So we've learned in this lesson how to be able to run our programs using the idle IDE. We've learned about how to create a variable, and we also learned how to assign a value to a variable. So that is it for this particular video. I'll see you next in the next video.